So we're a webcomic platform. We post once a week. We post sex-positive comics in all of their shapes and forms.
2 weeks ago, we introduced Oh Joy Sex Toy.
At the forefront of taking a lot of like hard, dense sex ed material and then trying to crack it and turning it into
Make
a
it
comic.
accessible.
The creators of Oh Joy Sex Toy, or OJST, Matvei and Erika, reflected on what made their platform an engaging resource.
When you can make somebody laugh, even if it's laughing at us, you lower their defenses. You release the tension, like whatever anxiety or fear they might have had about learning about herpes. Like we come in with some bad puns, they laugh, and then we're like, and now let's talk about herpes. And it just kind of like makes it easier to digest that information.
OJST supporters Jay, Zomby, David, and Corry explored how OJST's unique qualities turned it from a personal project into a global platform for reshaping sex culture.
I can't think of another example of where to find that type of information.
And the way that their comics are laid out, it's very straightforward. It's not complex. It's not all over the place. It's A to B. At the same time, it validates different experiences.
It's an easy, informative, humorous, unthreatening introduction to a lot of topics, which it's a library of great information that I can share with people who need it.
I could send maybe not all of these comics, but I could send these to family members or friends who were like, well, what does being non-binary mean? Like, what does it mean to be polyamorous?
And staff artist Hien introduced some of the challenges that OGST has had to face.
The thing with queer comics, especially sex-positive queer comics nowadays, is that places we are able to exist in are slowly sinking below us. So we're just kind of trying to prop each other up and finding more people to connect with, finding more ways to put out, our the things that we believe in and things that we're passionate about.
Now we will dive into how OGST flourished through the struggle with resilience.
When we started, we did always have guest artists contributing. It's just like Matt and I would do the majority of the comics. We'd basically fill up a month worth of comics, and then we would have one guest comic come on, and then it would be another month of Matt and me doing the comics, basically, more or less.
Matvei and Erika maintained a demanding content creation pace for many years and built an abundant library of sex-positive information.
This will be our 12th year.
This will be our 12th year, and I don't think we've ever missed a week. I think maybe we took 1 week off once.
I think we got COVID once.
Yeah,
but
like
we still put up a picture on that day. So like technically, there's always been something goes up every week.
Yeah.
While upkeeping the creative flow, Matvei and Erika also faced stigmatization.
There's lots of little platforms and issues with trying to monetize any kind of adult content of any kind, and it's just tough being out there.
OGST refuses to compromise its explicit sex-positive communication, and this choice is what makes it a precious resource.
I'm a Patreon supporter. I really like that they're driven mostly by that rather than through ad networks or doing big sponsorships all the time by unrelated companies. Like they're not doing Raid Shadow Legends ads and such. It's really cool to get third-party look at what sex education looks like and like how to navigate sexual relationships with people in a more holistic way and a more body-positive way.
Rejecting censorship helped OGST maintain integrity and also made them subject to stigma-driven discrimination.
Matt and Erika has gone through a lot.
I know that Erika and Matt have had to fight so many battles and fight so hard, not only against government censorship, but against things like payment platforms and web hosting platforms cutting them off because they have the word sex in the name.
Erika and Matt haven't given up. Like there's so many challenges they've talked about it a bit, about how, when they started, the internet was a very different place. And now everything has to be marketed a certain way.
Despite the challenges, Matvei and Erika have refused to compromise to stigma or slow down the pace of production.
They have been so persistent in doing all of the work that they need to do in order to keep the platform alive, when they could, at any time, they could have given up and gone on to do something else with their lives. But they stay on the front lines. They stay in the trenches. They keep fighting the good fight.
Over time, this level of dedication has strained Matvei and Erika.
I know how hard it has been, and I know it's taken a toll, especially on Erika's and also on Matt's life and mental health and all of that stuff. And so I'm glad that she is choosing to use her limited energy to keep trying to put this information out there where people can get it.
It takes 20, you got to be 20.
Yeah.
In your 20s, like full of energy and ready to take on the world. Like we're in our
40s.
We're in our 40s. We're tired.
Yeah.
Erika and Matvei refused to surrender to the ever-growing challenges, but as the founders of OGST aged, they could no longer confront the obstacles head-on.
And I really enjoy reading it every week. And the one big thing that has changed, and I understand why this has happened, is that lately, Erika isn't doing all of the art herself anymore. As a matter of fact, I think she's barely doing any strips herself.
Matvei and Erika found a way to maintain integrity, consistency, and their well-being by turning OGST into a community-driven platform.
We kind of shifted in the last handful of years to start incorporating more and more guest artists, and we've kind of taken more of a back step on it all. And now we have like this little community-driven platform where we get to have as many different voices as we can, and it's made the place way better.
We are the people that we are. We only have the perspective that we have, and we knew it's really important to share more than that. It's really important because the perspectives we have on sex and gender and sexuality does not represent everybody, because it's impossible to represent everybody. So we intentionally were hiring outside artists to contribute, so it wasn't just us all the time.
And after a few years, we were starting to run out of material. Like there's only so many times that we can kind of like cover a piece of sex ed or talk about a specific, I don't know, toy or perspective. And we were like, man, we're coming up dry. It would be good to have other people talk about their whatever's going on in their lives. And as soon as we started to do that too, we were like, wow, these are really important stories. We should be giving more and more of the platform to that.
In the beginning of this episode, OGST was called a global platform, and this is how it got here.
More recently, it seems like they've been platforming other artists that do either erotic comics that are just telling a story about people who are engaging in fun, sexy activities in some way, or telling a personal story. And I rather like that too. It's not that I feel like I'm missing out on the kind of content they were doing earlier so much, because they still intersperse those reviews sometimes and those educational pieces sometimes. But the new stuff, I think, fits in perfectly fine with it.
There's been a lot of changes, and by bringing in other artists, there's just variety of perspectives as well as topics.
While OGST always featured guest artists, Matvei and Erika began to give them more room. You've already met one of them. His name was Hien.
I feel like I can see a lot of the motivation behind me telling my stories in that way. Generally speaking, a lot of the half-beer, fluffy stories usually come from very dark places. So I think another reason why I'm okay with kind of putting my face out there and being like, hey, I'm experiencing these things, is because I've got nothing to lose, baby. My favorite movies of all time, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, kind of spoke about is that nothing matters. So we can do anything, you know? It's kind of my way of, telling my stories and telling the stories of the people around me who matter. and who make me feel like I matter.
Along with Hien, dozens of artists are now coming to OGST every year.
We have 2 semi-regular guest artists, me and Ripley, and then the last 2 spots in each month, 2 to 3, are all guest artists. And so it's become a place where my diverse comic artists can come and get paid a really nice rate and have this incredible platform to tell their stories. Like it went from a personal project of a small group of people to now basically a global platform. And I think that's incredible.
OGST's longtime audience has many feelings about this shift, but their commitment to the mission of OGST, rather than its founders alone, has helped them embrace the change.
They have people come and talk about things that they love. For example, there's All About Gag that comes up, and the way that they navigate their experiences with navigating kink and navigating sexuality is sort of a different viewpoint. And I like that it's become a community platform.
So I follow Erika's Patreon as well, and so I know from her diary comics the reasons why she's pulled away. And so even though I miss her content, I'm, not wishing for her to do anything that she can't. But it's been nice. Like, she did the review this year, illustrated the review, and just kind of having her still be a part of the community even while she's not responsible for having the entire thing on her shoulders anymore has been a way for, again, it to continue, because it's been doing so much good educating people around the world.
With more voices on board, the narratives of OGST have expanded greatly.
They've acquired or they've created a community of artists to carry on the work, and it's a great variety of voices, a number of different voices, a lot of queer stuff that you aren't seeing in other places, a lot of furry stuff that you're not seeing in other places. It is a great resource to have out there, and I love reading it just because it's fun and funny and beautiful. I mean, it is an aesthetic experience to have originally Erika's art and now so many different artists, landing on my screen every week, and that's great.
I really enjoy that they have excerpts from a lot of really lovely indie sex workers.
By inviting new voices, OGST has branched into new storytelling dimensions, and with that, it has given more room for belonging.
A lot of the content revolves around self-image, about having our bodies represented faithfully and beautifully without them having to meet some standard that's set by some marketing company somewhere to tell us things. And seeing people with different types of bodies and hair and different gender expressions is great when we can get that. It does a really good job of being body positive and validating without being too complicated.
The content of OGST is more diverse than ever and makes audience members feel seen and understood in new ways.
My polyamory identity is pretty important to me, so I've searched through the tags and gone through the whole website to try and find content that I can share with other people that are also polyamorous. And so whether it's, Danielle Corsetto's autobiographical comic where she just kind of talks about her identity, to the other pornographic ones where it's just super inclusive. Seeing cartoons and porn that were inclusive of group relationships was pretty cool.
Beyond offering validation, greater representation empowers readers to connect with themselves and their communities.
And I might feel intimidated about going to a community dead night, for example, but he's been writing comics about it, and I know what to expect. Like, breaking down that barrier, that entry barrier, is really important to me because I didn't have that growing up.
It made me feel more prepared while simultaneously being something that I could easily relate to on a visual level. I knew what I was looking for. I knew how to interact a little bit better with somebody that I was interested in.
Matvei and Erika are no longer as public-facing in their work, but they are still the heartbeat of OGST.
Like, it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. In our current incarnation of the site, we have 2 kind of staff artists who each commit to doing 1 comic a month. And then we have 2 artists that Matt just finds fresh to fill.
I'm always trying to hunt for people who can do good stories. I'm much better at an editor as well. Like, I feel like I have that licked rather than, constantly having to create, which is just it's a different part of your brain and exhausts you.
Yeah. Well, and editing it's a full-time job as well. Once we transitioned to being just a publisher for other people, we brought on an additional editor.
Erika and Matvei have aged, but that doesn't mean that they're any less passionate about sex.
It's in a really interesting phase.
Yeah.
We're always on the hunt to try to get more support and funding for it.
Mm-hmm.
The pace of having to try to make sure we fill a comic, even when Erika and I aren't working on these and we're hiring out, trying to get one done in a week. I'm working with so many artists at any given time. A lot of them will drop out or things will happen.
Mm-hmm.
It can take like a month to make a comic, right?
Mm-hmm.
If somebody's properly on it with editorial and that, it's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
For many years, Erika and Matvei maintained the platform itself. Now, they help it remain true to its core.
I wasn't really allowed to have a life of my own. It was very much like you study and you do well in school and that's it. There was no creative arts or whatever. Like the concept of a gap year didn't exist. There's no finding yourself. So when I grew up and I moved to Australia and I kind of split off on my own, I was like, you know what? I have been silenced more than enough. And so I just went the complete opposite way of like, I will say everything and anything about myself. I just lived most of my life not being able to express myself. So now I will just do it at the expense of everybody around me.
Hien's identity, experiences, and perspectives differ from Matvei and Erika's, and his work is challenging the upbeat and light tone of prior OGST works.
When I was writing OG6 comics, is that I haven't been able to tackle really heavy stuff. I think the heaviest comic I've made is one where I was really heartbroken and I needed to be there for myself to like hold my own hand. But that obviously came from an incredibly dark place.
Along with Hien, many other artists are bringing in fresh stories, which don't always match the energy of Matt and Erika's original contributions.
I think when we were doing it as the Erika and Matvei show, we were always just jumping on, silly gags or keeping it really lighthearted through comedy, even puns. But when we started to bring other people in, we had to sort of try to find a line in the sand when it came to, how much trauma from an artist would we sort of give space to, and how do we correctly point them towards the powerful part, which is like the moment of change or revelation or the moment where things got better. And that's always been quite tough for us. That's been something we've been changing a little bit as we go all the time.
Aligning new perspectives with the founders' contributions has become Erika and Matvei's new role, and they are threading it carefully.
Yeah, we'll take on harder subjects. You add more and more voices, and they come with a lot more variety in the kind of stories that they bring. We are changing this equation all the time.
Yeah.
Like I sit down with our main editor, Erika and I and him will talk about this a lot. And our artists will constantly challenge the lines in the sands. And they'll be like, I really want to talk about this. And it's like, wow, that's a really great story. Does it work for Oh Joy sex toy? It's like, well, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it does. Maybe we need to think about this again. And so that line kind of keeps shifting. I think it will continue to do so as the world changes as well.
As OGST's content becomes more vibrant, the editorial team, which is more than just Matvei and Erika, is moved to re-examine what is at the core of OGST.
I love my work. I love OJ Sex Toy. This is nothing against them. But there are certain topics where I want to explore the impact of things that have had on me in a negative sense, so that the payoff where I'm hopeful and optimistic kind of hit a bit harder, or that I'm able to portray things in its full shape, right? The positive, hopeful stuff, but also there's a really dark that also happens. So the work that goes online, especially with Ultra Sex Toy, I mostly am only able to present the happy stuff.
In order to maintain consistency, the editorial team imposes narrative limitations, and that requires artists to sacrifice certain aspects of their story.
So like I've been working with my editors for a long time to find the right balance, to be like, I don't bum people out, but I still kind of have that sense of like, there's probably more to this, but today we're going to focus on what makes us happy. So it's kind of difficult in that sense sometimes when those topics come up. And the thing is, like, it's difficult to separate the art from the artist, like you said, when my art is kind of me in a sense. It's not completely me. It's the Hien on the page is still like an edited version of the Hien in real life, especially on a site like Ultra Sex Toy, where we focus more on the joy part of it. In fact, my editors have had to deal with me being a little bit more heavy-handed towards certain topics, but that kind of serves to make the vibe of the site a bit more accessible for most people.
They'll give feedback and say, hey, this story went in a really dark place. Can we take it this place? But it's always encouraged to the writers and the cartoonists to, like, if you disagree with us, please push back. Like, please argue with us. Please explain to us why it really does need to be told this way. So it's not just like a one-way street of our way or the high. I mean, maybe it can feel like that sometimes, but it's dialogue. It's dialogue between the creator and the editors.
As OGST continues to expand its artist base, the editorial team digs deeper into what makes OGST OGST.
With the stories that we're sharing through Oh Joy, like, yes, we do share our personal stories, but it's always through the lens of how will this relate to the reader? How will this benefit the reader? How can we connect to the reader, rather than it just being like, I'm gonna tell my story? It's like, what can I put in my story that will connect with somebody else and be relevant to them?
Since inception, the ultimate aim of Oh Joy Sex Toy was to be a relevant and empowering resource, and that does not have to be limited to sex toys and light-hearted stories.
We mix things up when we do take a couple of fiction comics, and I'm always trying to get the mix feeling right, because I don't want there just to be fiction, tons of fiction, but I enjoy just a silly little comic that's just a little flirtatious thing, as much as the education. I think it's kind of it's fun to find education where you sit and you read and you learn, and then to move on to another thing where you just have a giggle.
Blending change and integrity is challenging, but OGST and its community both embrace this uncertain process.
It's a combination of informative and sexy and funny, and so I think the flavor of the site has changed quite a bit over the years, but the basic message and mission are still the same. And I'm here for it. I love reading it every week, and I'm here to support it.
The diligence of Matvei, Erika, and the rest of the editorial team has empowered the platform to blossom while remaining true to its core.
I rather like that too. It's not that I feel like I'm missing out on the kind of content they were doing earlier so much, because they still intersperse those reviews sometimes and those educational pieces sometimes. But the new stuff, I think, fits in perfectly fine with it.
I feel like right now, OJoy is in its kind of golden age of comics.
While OGST may be flourishing, the world around it keeps growing more desperate and oppressive.
I grew up in Vietnam in the 90s, so I was the first generation born in peace. My parents were both in the war, and so the country was still rebuilding itself, and there were a lot of like certain ideologies, and the culture was geared towards like the economic growth. It's not focused on the individual culture. Like, it doesn't matter so much who you are as a person back then. I'm sure it's different now, But when I was growing up, it didn't matter who you were as a person. It mattered more so how much you can contribute to the wider country.
Hien is speaking of a different time, but the individual struggles he had to confront are equally relevant today.
OJST is a uniquely necessary resource in this increasingly messed up time and place.
The work I do is a bit more on the fluffy side, a bit more on like the chirpy, happy-go-lucky side. I write about sex. I write sex education. Like I write fluffy romantic stuff, but I also support the freaky, sexy stuff. But I've seen like with the genre that I operate in being pushed to kind of like people who don't want sex at all to use like, oh, this is the acceptable queer work, as opposed to like it's just part of the larger sum. It's like the whole community. There's multiple perspectives to be had. My work should not demonize other people's work because I also enjoy those people's work.
Even spaces where self-expression has historically flourished are impacted by the dominating narratives of doom and despair.
Especially in today's day and age, we'll talk to an artist and they will bring a lot of very difficult subjects, and trying to steer that into a way that it makes the comic feel like there's a positive or a good takeaway is it can be quite difficult.
Matvei and Erika's commitment to positivity can appear personal, but it is also a commitment to leaving the world better than they found it.
When you're talking about trauma or just difficult experiences, you can either talk about it in like trauma dump, where you just say, here's everything bad that happened. And that can be really cathartic. And there are plenty of comics and cartoonists who do tell that, and that's important, that resonates with some people. And the kind of way we want people to talk about traumatic and difficult experiences is to find what was hopeful in that. So you can still talk about the hard thing. You can still talk about the trauma because that is going to resonate. And then we don't just want to leave it at that. We don't just want to leave it at that was bad and it hurt me. We want it to be, okay, that was bad, that was hard, and here is what I'm doing to survive it. Here's what I'm doing to heal. Here's what I'm doing to keep existing in this space and have some kind of hope. Because we want somebody to read the site and come away with a grain of hope or joy.
OGST's positivity is in conversation with, rather than avoidance of, the oppression that queer and sex-positive communities are confronting.
As opposed to doom scrolling on social media. You can just see a list of horrors with every scroll. And we want to be a place where, okay, things aren't always perfect, but you can still have some hope.
The internet at large it's there's a lot of people doing sex comics, but doing ones that leave you better off was always what we wanted to do with Oh Joy.
Yeah.
I mean, Dan Savage kind of created like a one-liner, which is like a campsite rules, right? You leave someone better off than you found them. And that's kind of how I like to approach treating readers. I'm very much readers first rather than sort of creators first. So a creator will come with their story, but it's really important that the story isn't just for the creator. It's very important that it leaves the reader better off or helps translate a message to the reader that feels useful.
OGST's storytelling approach invites readers to dive into darker subjects and emerge empowered rather than suffocated.
I don't mind a little bit of trauma if it helps travel the point. But if it's just that, then you're leaving a reader potentially worse off than when you found them. Like you don't want to trigger folk. You don't want to make them just see their own hurts and harms. You want to be able to go, hey, listen, that exists, but then this, right? And then that's the moment that feels really valuable and constructive for somebody to read and take away.
With this intention, OGST's ever-growing library of stories molds into something greater than itself.
Because even if you can't end on a note of, and then I fixed everything, we wanted the comic to be like, here's how I am resilient in this. Here's how I maintain my hope. Here's how I maintain my humanity. And maybe that will resonate with you, dear reader. Maybe that will give you a seed to grow in your own heart about how to be resilient and how to survive.
OGST's commitment to hope in face of despair nourishes communal resiliency.
It's become like a tool also for me to connect with my local communities, right? And connect with my friends where I'm like, oh, I see someone having a kink or a fetish that I haven't heard about. I can do it for work. It's kind of become like such a encouraging and enabling tool for me to become more brave in the way that I approach people and talk about things.
And when resilience becomes praxis, it blooms into courage that empowers us to break through the oppressive barriers and connect with each other.
So they've created a sexual health resource that not only exists to support body positivity, sex positivity, understanding for people who live with STIs, understanding for people who live with different body types, different gender expressions, different sex expressions, but all around they've created such a holistic space to exist that it's become part of everyday life for me, and I regularly go back to it for information.
OGST has gone far in reshaping sex culture and cultivated a precious space like no other.
Ojo Sex Toy has been incredible. I've been working with them for more than 3 years, and like we've had our ups and downs, but it has been such a huge part of my life. And it's helped me kind of refine my work process, how I work with other people. And the entire team at Ocho Sex Toy, like I absolutely love them to death. I think they're the best group of people I've ever worked with. The art just kills me. It's incredible.
And despite all that they've gone through, Matvei and Erika still burn with passion.
The world of sex is fascinating. So much more than the anatomy and the physical act of sex. It's it's social, it's cultural, it's legal. There's so much around it that's beyond the act of it. And I think it's really fascinating. The both of us do. And we want more, is what I'm trying to say. Like we want there to be more. We want more people to do this as well.
600 comics. To me, I kind of thought we would be done. I thought that would be the world of sex, right? Like that's wild. But we still keep getting more people applying, bringing a completely different perspective.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh, well, yeah, that's really important. Yeah, of course I want that. Oh, that. Like, sure, let's do it.
Okay, I gotta say, completely different perspective on my end. Because to me, like people in the first few years of Ojoy, they would say, "Oh, so when are you gonna wrap this up? When are you gonna run out of stuff?" And I'd be like, "I don't think like there's more to talk about sex than I have time and space to." And I still do feel that way. I just like I'm old now and I'm tired and I don't have the energy and time to do all those comics. But there's so many more subjects that I do want covered.